For U.S. President Donald Trump right now, it's all about the investigations. The impeachment investigation into his dealings with Ukraine, and now another one. Published reports say that the president reached out to Australian Prime Minister Scott Morrison for help looking into how the investigation into Russian election interference got started. And he's not alone. His Attorney General, William Barr, reportedly did the same with the United Kingdom and Italy. If true, this would be unprecedented. U.S. officials asking allies to help them investigate U.S. intelligence agencies. And the congressional investigation into the Ukrainian controversy is speeding ahead. On Monday, new subpoenas for Trump's confidant, Rudy Giuliani's documents on his dealings with Ukraine. Giuliani responded saying he might testify, but is still claiming he is Trump's lawyer, which could imply attorney-client privilege. But analyst Jeff Hauser says Giuliani has publicly said something very different.
Rudy Giuliani has said that he is not actually Trump's personal attorney. He is doing essentially emissary work on behalf of Trump as an individual and the Trump campaign, and that does not provide any sort of privilege which would protect his documents from going to Congress.
The president has been taking to Twitter and to the cameras to pronounce he's done nothing wrong. The response from Democrats in Congress, we'll find out, and fast. Patty Culhane, Al Jazeera, Washington.
And we can now go live to Andrew Thomas, who is in Sydney for us. So, Andrew, what's been the reaction there in Australia?
Well, we haven't heard anything yet, Divya, from Australia's Prime Minister himself, but a spokesperson for the Australian government essentially said that this was all routine, that Australia's government has always been ready to assist and cooperate with efforts that help shed further light on the matters under investigation. And the Prime Minister, Scott Morrison, confirmed this readiness once again in a conversation with the President. What Australia's government also did is published a letter that Australia's ambassador to the US wrote to the Trump administration back in May, saying at that time, when Trump had said publicly that he wanted an investigation into the Mueller investigation, that Joe Hockey, Australia's ambassador, had sent a letter then saying that Australia stood ready to help with that investigation. And all Scott Morrison did in that phone call with Donald Trump at the beginning of September was confirm that. Well, unsurprisingly, perhaps, Australia's opposition party here doesn't see it the same way. Anthony Albanese, the Labour politician who wants to take Scott Morrison's job at the next election, he says that this is all very murky and shows a much too close relationship between the US President and Australia's Prime Minister, a political relationship, one that goes way beyond two friendly countries. He said about an hour ago now, his assistance is in discrediting the Mueller investigation. So he sees this as a political investigation by Donald Trump, not merely a legal investigation, and that Scott Morrison should be distancing himself from what is essentially a domestic political issue. Already, the Labour Party here was saying that Scott Morrison was much too close to the US President. Scott Morrison was in the US on a state visit last week. At one stage, he was on stage with the US President at what looked like a campaign rally in Ohio. So already a lot of disquiet here in Australia that Scott Morrison is much too close to Donald Trump, and this only feeds into that.
The Mueller inquiry has to do with Russian interference into the 2016 election. So why is Australia being asked about it?
Yeah. Good question. Well, in a sense, it all began with an Australian diplomat, Alexander Downer, who was a former foreign minister of Australia, but by 2016 was Australia's essentially ambassador. He was actually the High Commissioner to the United Kingdom. He was in London and got invited to a meeting at a wine bar with George Papadopoulos, who at the time was working on the Trump campaign. Trump hadn't won the nomination of the Republican Party, but he was close to it. And over drinks in this London wine bar, Papadopoulos said to Alexander Downer that he expected Trump to win the election in part because he knew the Russians had some dirt on Hillary Clinton and that they were likely to leak that during the campaign. Well, Alexander Downer thought this very interesting information. He fed it back to Canberra, and Canberra in turn felt that it was worthy of telling the FBI about this information, and all of that led to the Mueller investigation under Trump's presidency. So in a sense, that investigation wouldn't have happened without that initial conversation in that wine bar in London, and that conversation eventually making its way back to the FBI. Well, George Papadopoulos has been on Twitter early on Tuesday, really rubbishing Alexander Downer and saying this is his chickens coming home to roost. He thinks Alexander Downer was a spy, essentially, for the Clinton campaign. and he thinks this is all going to lead to that.
Thank you very much. Andrew Thomas in Sydney for us.